Alrighty, so we're going to be talking about ILE today. So I actually just recently had an ILE roommate move in, so I've gotten some recent experiences with ILEs, and I am excited to talk about this. So let's dive in. All right, so first, their base function is extroverted intuition. So this is potential, ideas, possibilities, perspectives. The mental generation of ideas. That's something that the ILE is really good at. This is their base function. And then as far as the ignoring position, it's going to be introverted intuition. So, the relationship here is that NI ultimately gets in the way of what their base function is doing. So rather than looking at the sort of long-term goal or sort of asking yourself consistently, like, is this in league with what I'm trying to do? Is this in league with where I'm going? That might be something they consider because it is something they're capable with. But generally, extrovert intuition is opportunistic. They what I've noticed is that they have, especially ILEs, they have a real ability to see in a given moment something that isn't there, right? And that might sound a little vague, but I think it's worth describing it a little bit differently than the typical way, because there's something here that I don't think is covered very often. They're a very positive type. In general, Alpha Quadra has this, sort of positivist attitude. And the SC and I valuing quadras can be a lot harsher and, deal with more negative emotions, right? I mean, Beta loves exploring negative emotions. That's kind of like their whole thing. Or it's a part of their whole thing. And then Gamma, Gamma can just be so focused on themselves that they don't really want to deal with a lot of people, and they sort of have a uncaring attitude towards, the rest of the world, I suppose you could say. They stick to, them and their own, right? But back to the point, which was that, the alpha types tend to be a positivist quadra, and what I've noticed is that in moments where, even myself as an ethical type, I might be doing things and kind of trying to juggle everything that's going on in my daily life and trying to keep the vibes up. And then, my ILE roommate will, notice a sort of, I'll be like, oh, I wanted to do this, but I wasn't able to do this because this other thing fell through. And basically, I might have wanted to have like a better outcome or a more positive outcome, but, based on just me trying to solve the daily problems that I might have, they hear that, and it's like they turn it into a possibility. It's really interesting. It's like they see something in that moment where they're like, oh, well, why don't we just do this? And it's like, it's actually a great idea most of the time. I'm actually like astonished with their ideas, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because, I feel bad in that moment because I'm trying to keep the atmosphere good, and I'm trying to, deal with that while I deal with, the like practical problems in my life. And they'll just, change the nature of it and redirect it into something else. And they'll go, well, we could just do this. And it's like, it's so simple. But I've noticed is a really positive, there's like a really positive flow there. It's very different from SLEs. In my experience, the SLEs, kind of like have a thing they want to do. And so it's like, oh, well, at least we don't have to worry about like figuring that out now. And it's like super clear. This is different. This is sort of serving up an idea or a possibility or a potential that can enrich the experience. And I've been very intrigued by having this interaction, actually, because most of the people in my life are not this way. So yeah, it's been interesting. It's been interesting to get this perspective on ILEs as well. So so I spent a lot of time on extrovert intuition, and I'm still not done yet. I think we have a couple other things to cover. For one, generally, I think that there's this sort of idea, I think it comes from MBTI, that extroverted intuitive types are like ADD and like crazy and sporadic. And I don't think this is true for Socionics. I don't think it's impossible either. I think that an extroverted intuitive type can be sporadic, and I think they can be, constantly generating new ideas, and and like to the point where it's like at a really high rate of just like a constant stream or flow. But I don't think that's a requirement either. I've noticed that some extroverted intuitive types, it's sort of more like a slow drip, or like a one prevailing idea, which is interesting because on its surface that sounds, one prevailing idea could sound like introverted intuition, but that's not how I mean it. It's just that it's not a constant stream. It's more balanced, it's more even keel, it's more steady, more calm, than what we would typically think of someone with ADHD who's just like, or ADD who's just spewing out possibilities. I don't think this is what an ILE is. I think that they just have this resource of being able to pull on a lot of different perspectives or see a lot of different avenues and ways to go down a given situation. And in particular with this type, they're going to be one of the best at doing that in a pragmatic sense because they have demonstrative TE. So, you have to think, demonstrative TE, base any. This person is incredible at coming up with different practical solutions. They're extremely good problem solvers. I think that's something that you see this with SLE too. But SLEs are limited in their capacity to generate different kinds of approaches. It's certainly something they have an ability to do. It's a two-dimensional element, but the ILE is going to be extremely good at this. Solving a pragmatic problem is one thing, but when you have the ability to see all of the different ways that a pragmatic problem could be addressed in such like a vast variation, I think you're going to see someone who can be quite insightful in the way that they address a problem, or maybe even, explorative. It's almost like, if you can explore to that extent, why wouldn't you spend a lot of time thinking on how something could be solved to eventually come up with some incredible approach, right? So that's something you're going to see with this type, and I think that is the main thing I wanted to cover with NE. So I think we're good. We can move on. Their creative function is TI, and their demonstrative function is TE. So they're constantly collecting a lot of data. It's not just about that pragmatic ability. It's also that they're collecting a lot of information, right? That's what TE is. It's objective, real world information. So you're getting a lot of that, right? For the ILE, they're collecting a lot of information, probably very well read. Probably know a lot of different things. But what's interesting is they're going to consolidate that into introverted logic, which is going to be a comprehensive understanding, comprehensive approach. They're not just going to refer to facts and then not have some, understanding of what's what's going on or what principles are, those facts are speaking to, right? They're going to have a pretty comprehensive understanding. And, that's just something that is, it's one of my favorite things about ILE and SLE, because for myself, I'm a IEI, the TE vulnerable can be very difficult. And for someone to be able to take all of that TE information and consolidate it into a logical system of understanding or a set of principles is very helpful. It's very helpful. But it's also a very well-rounded understanding. Then not only do they have this breadth of knowledge, but they're also able to just build a solid perspective or a solid understanding of all of that information. And so that's a really cool aspect of this type. So moving on a little bit, they have Mobilizing FE. So generally, Mobilizing FE tends to be, it can be kind of hit or miss. I think generally the Mobilizing is like that. Sometimes the way that ILEs and the way that SLEs use Mobilizing FE is actually quite good. I've noticed, I'm like, wow, like the way that they were able to convey that was honestly really impressive. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, the ILE and the SLE are more formal. In a lot of cases. And so I've seen them express a very formal type of FE. And it's quite good. It's quite, I'd say, professional. I think there's a desire for these types to get something out there, and they come from a very logical place. So there's a formality to them as it is. Very logical types, but they want to get that out. They want to get that expression out. And so I think that when they do, it can come off very formal, but in a polished kind of way. It's actually quite interesting. Now, I will say, ILE, I'm kind of calling them formal right now. Something else to keep in mind with this type is they can be quite nerdy or dorky, Not all of them are this way, to be fair. I've seen some that don't really carry this I don't know, they don't have this sort of persona, but I think a lot of them can be very dorky or sort of geeky, I guess you could say, nerdy. But they certainly an aspect of what's common with ILEs. I'm trying to think of like an example. I've certainly seen it. I feel like I would be picking on them. I think I'll just leave it like that. That's fine. Now, they have FI vulnerable. So this is interesting. They're going to be judging. They're going to be judging how people are in their environment based off of the sort of vibes they're giving off, and they're not really going to have a sense of what people around them like or dislike, or what their, I guess you could say, psychological distance is from them. It's not going to be abundantly clear, and I guess for an ILE or for an SLE, it's going to be quite binary in the sense that it's either you're in or out, right? FI vulnerable tends to be this way. They don't have people who are in the middle. It's either they're in your life, they are a friend, they're close to you, or they're not. The sort of degrees of variation in a relationship are basically none. It's one or the other. And for these types, they're not going to have a sense of, like a natural sense of how people feel towards things, or unless someone expresses it. So they're going to be looking for that. They're looking for people to express how they feel so that they can understand them better. And typically, in my experience, that mobilizing FE paired with the demonstrative TE and the creative TI turns into a person who, you know, not only watches your actions and builds an understanding of, like, I suppose, like your laws, you know, in the sense that you are likely to follow a certain behaviors, or certain things would be out of your, unless you're just very unpredictable. They'll probably have a sense of what things you're likely to do and what things you're not likely to do. And they'll probably have a pretty good understanding of that. In particular, I think because they're looking for you to express how you feel, I think they'll take that information and end up utilizing it, or making a sort of a system around it. That's what's interesting about these types, you know. I think that they tend to be pretty observant on the way that you are and the things that you express, and I think a lot of times they see relationships as like a problem or a puzzle they can solve, right? It's like, okay, well, if this person likes these things, then I just have to organize this way, or I have to fix this problem, and that'll make the relationship better. I think that's what you tend to see with these types, is they kind of try to use logic to address the relationship problem. It's pretty interesting. But they're going to be relying on that extroverted feeling, and if you're not giving it, they're not really going to know where you stand. In fact, I think they're going to expect you. They're going to expect you to express how you feel about things, which, I mean, I think that's a generally good rule. Yeah, I think that's good for that. And so that's FI, vulnerable. And then this type has SE, role. So we're going to get to SI, suggestive, in a minute. They tend to be assertive. ILEs tend to be assertive. That's something that, you know, they do value introverted sensation, but it's easier for them to use SE, role. I often say this, the role, I like to call the role function the adaptive function or the crutch function, but adaptive is better. And it's because, you know, you typically fall back on your role when your base fails or when your suggestive fails. And so when you try to utilize your suggestive and it doesn't work out, it's easier for you as a type to fall back on your role. And so, you know, it's the same thing here. It's like, you know, if they're trying to create that cozy, warm atmosphere, or if they're trying to, you know, I suppose you could say mediate things, or address things in a more calm or cordial manner, and it doesn't work out, they may default to being more assertive. And in fact, you may just generally see their demeanor as more assertive than not. The ILE, you know, isn't assertive at heart, but it's something that is easier for them. So yeah, this is something you're going to see with this type. Generally, they wouldn't take that route if they don't have to. But again, because it's easier, they may end up doing so. So as for SI, suggestive, they're looking for someone who, you know, I find that the SEI has a way of simplifying things for the ILE. You know, I just recently talked to an ILE SEI couple, you know, before I did this video, because I wanted to get some more information. that could be helpful. And basically the story that he told me, this ILE guy, he told me that there was a time he was working on a marketing campaign, and the marketing campaign had a bunch of different like landing pages. They were testing out different marketing strategies, and then he got some advice from his SEI wife, and I think she just ended up making one of her own like variations. And instead of using all of these different landing pages, they used emojis. They used different emojis, and it ended up being a lot more successful than all the things that they had tried, right? And he told me that what he saw that as was basically this type. She had an ability to show him that it's often simpler for people than what he might think it is. The ILE is a great problem solver. They can pick apart really difficult problems and create novel solutions, and they're a powerhouse in that regard. But at the end of the day, a lot of people, in their approach to these things, it's very simple. So that can kind of create this disparity for an ILE who is trying to create this, very complex maybe way of addressing a problem, and come to find out the people that he's trying to address the problem for are, just regular everyday people who are tired after a day of work, laying down on their couch, not giving a shit, and then they're like interacting with something. If it's simple, if it's made out to be something that can be fun for a person or an individual, then there's sort of a quiet simplicity in that, right? And that's what I think the SEI has to offer here is, the SEI generally can be a pretty positive type as well. And I find that they're, like, in my experience, the SEIs are generally focused on what makes them feel good and what makes them happy. And so, it's sort of, straightforward or very simple approach to like how they live their life. And so I think in a sense, it's very grounding for an ILE to be reminded of how simple things can be. I don't think it's just about, solving their problems. I think in general, I think this person could represent to them someone who can make life more simple. For someone who is constantly generating novel ideas and coming up with different solutions to problems and, nerding out on whatever it is that they're interested in. I think that the SEI can be someone who reminds them that life is simple and life is to be enjoyed. And, you can go out there and have great, fun experiences that make you happy. So somehow that just seems like the best way to end this video. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. So go ahead and like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, send this to one of your friends, and comment down below what you think. Talk to you guys soon.